another thing to consider is, and obviously this leads in very nicely from the previous presentation in terms of what is happening in the sort of the macro market in terms of legislation and rule changes. And it isn't just about sort of pack labeling. It's a much wider thing. We've got around the world single-use plastic bans. You've got things like, I mean, in the States is complicated by the fact you've got 50 different states all sort of driving their own slightly different agendas. California recently were announcing a single-use plastic ban and tethered caps for bottles and things like that. So as part of the discussions that you're having in terms of what you need to do for your packaging, you need to get advice from experts, and many of those are behind you there, in terms of what is happening in terms of legislation and rule changes to ensure that you're kind of future-proofed, because it's no good necessarily being okay for now. It's what's coming down the line in 3, 5, or even 10 years' time. You know, investing in expensive kit that will be redundant because there's a law change in 2 or 3 years' time is not going to help you.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I mean, you mentioned the states, so we have the issue of not having a homogeneous, law to follow. I mean, there's 4 states right now that are, I think it's, Maine, Oregon, Colorado, and California, that are exploring or actually have on the books EPR laws, or extended producer responsibility laws. So that would actually be, it works as a tax essentially against the producer of packaging to begin with. And of course that's, it's varied state by state, but it's another, EPR is something to keep an eye on as well.
So let's look at some of the big, we've focused on 3 sort of macro trends here that are driving packaging innovation change. And the first one I've helpfully called recycling, recycling, recycling. And what we've got here is just a few examples really of, recycled, there's 2 factors to recyclability, and it's increasing and improving the recyclability of a product, but also increasing the recycled content of that product. So we're seeing a lot of examples. So first one, Kit Kat, top left, they've recently introduced 80% recycled content for some of their new pieces of packaging in Europe. And we're seeing a lot of examples of recycled content to reduce the impact of virgin plastic material. Like that. Bottom left is a recycled expanded polystyrene solution from Germany. So polystyrene has been under a lot of pressure, and some states have banned its use, and lots of operators are getting rid of the material for other options. But there are developers out there that are looking to find ways to actually cost-effectively recycle it. So that's just an example there. Bottles in the middle, again, is another recycled content. I mentioned the tethered caps, so that's coming in around Europe, and certainly California on there. And another thing about recycled or recyclability is about reducing the complexity of materials. So the top right one, which is a German household brand, that trigger spray is made of 1 material, so that means it can be curbside recycled much more easily. So that's just some examples to give you a snapshot, really, of some of the recycling initiatives we're spotting.
Yeah, mono-material, that's what Paul just left with, but that is what, once you get up into the halls in here, and I had the chance to cruise around this morning and a little bit yesterday, and also I had the advantage of getting dozens or even hundreds of press releases from companies ahead of time. Monomaterials, it's the two big thing is moving towards monomaterials where sealant layers can actually act as the barrier layer, the oxygen barrier. You're seeing this a lot with pet food. The lower right quadrant there is a pet food. Pet food's a problem because it's big, it's heavy, so you need good tensile strength and puncture resistance on these bags. And it's also something that needs to have a long shelf life. And let's face it, there's some malodorous elements to pet food that you want to be able to keep inside the bag. So right now we're seeing a lot of movement in pet food, finally catching up in pet food, getting into these monolayer materials, monomaterials. It's not necessarily monolayer, it's monomaterial, single material with the sealant or a tie layer that acts as the barrier. Some of that can even be food contact. Pet food counts as food contact, but Annie's Organic, that's another General Mills brand, The cereal liner is used with recycled polyethylene, so RPE, which there isn't nearly as much of available as PET, but you're seeing brands move into this area. Another big story, I keep plugging the magazine, but another big story in November, it's going to be on the cover, is a coalition in Minnesota that's going for the holy grail of film-to-film recycling. We hear a lot about a recycling that's downcycling, where polyethylene may be turned into, especially films, may be turned into lawn furniture or playground material. This is an actual getting film back into a pouch into a pouch. And that's happening right now and within the next few years. Another monolayer, Colgate, Palmolive, they're actually not licensing the technology, but they're making the technology available to their competitors in this space, where they've removed their aluminum layer. Again, that qualifies almost as food contact. Smarties, there are, I think, 419 total SKUs of Smarties. It's a Nestle brand, sort of similar. It's a candy confectionery brand. They went to paper packaging, and they were able to go to paper packaging using a lot of similar equipment that they had. So their flow wrapping, for instance, is on paper now. And then in the recycling vein, I'll try and be fast, one of the most exciting things that's on the horizon, I know I said there's no silver bullet. The closest thing to a silver bullet is something called chemical recycling or advanced recycling, where it's essentially taking plastic polymers and breaking them down through pyrolysis or something else to a monomer and then building it back up. So again, we mentioned film to film. This could potentially be any kind of polymer to any kind of polymer. And this is stuff that would otherwise go to landfill. There is no recycling capability for it. Eastman actually supplies the plastic for the herbal essences bottle that's entirely made of advanced recycled material. So.
Okay, Matt, I think your point about the Colgate example, where they're actually sharing that IP, their Greenleaf IP, to their competitors, is very encouraging, because obviously most people are developing packaging solutions for a competitive advantage, and clearly they're first mover and they have that competitive advantage. But to share that technology with their competitors is a very encouraging step in our pursuit to improve the environment.
Yeah, it needs to happen.